Let's not waste any more time and get right to the biggest game of week 2. The #1 team in the country travels to the Lone Star State to take on future SEC foe, Texas. Kickoff is at noon on Fox, so let's talk about it. Travis Reier from Bama Online and Chip Brown of Horns 24/7 are here with all the knowledge. And guys, speaking of knowledge, there's a lot of familiarity between these two teams, from coaching staffs to rosters. They know each other very well. So how does Alabama take advantage of that, Travis?
It works both ways, right? There is extreme familiarity, even again, when you talk about some of the personnel involved in this matchup. I think with Sark, he is such a master play designer and play caller. You're going to have some concerns about what he knows about how you go about your business on the defensive side. But, I think that works again for Alabama, having that knowledge of Sark as well. So, I think that there's going to be some familiarity and some similarities in terms of schematic approach for both these teams. They both line up in terms of their systems on offense and defense. So that's where it'll be interesting because, again, Sark has an intimate understanding of Alabama's current personnel to a large extent. And so that should help Texas in terms of how they're going to go about attacking that defensive side. And, if you're Alabama, you kind of know what to expect from that regard. I think in some ways this could be a game where we see Sark dial up some of the stuff we've seen Lane Kiffin dial up in the past as Ole Miss's head coach against his old boss, Nick Saban.
Yeah, I think no matter what Steve Sarkisian knows or doesn't know, he needs to tell his team that he's got the secret sauce, that he knows stuff, that he's got a game plan that's going to work, because anything he can tell his players to get them to feel confident walking onto the field against Alabama, whether it's Jeff Banks and Keelan Robinson and Jaleel Billingsley and Agiye Hall, all telling each other that, hey, we know what to expect, how to expect it. Again, this is a Texas team that lost at home to Kansas last year, went 5-7, and is trying to learn how to win. And so at this point, just make your players believe that that stuff that is going to get them an advantage, a schematic advantage in this game, whether it's true or not.
I love it. It's such a mental game. That's so true. Well, guys, we all know the big names, but you both know who will actually make an impact on Saturday. So, Chip, let's start with you. Who's an X factor in this game?
Well, I think Quinn Ewers, obviously, when you talk about, Bryce Young on the other side, the Heisman Trophy winner, maybe the best quarterback in Alabama's history, Quinn Ewers is going to have to keep pace. I mean, I hate to bring up Texas A&M in this conversation for Longhorns fans, but Zach Calzada found a way to keep pace with Bryce Young last year in A&M's home upset win over Alabama. Quinn Ewers, it's only his second college start, only his second start since his junior year in high school in 2020. But this kid can throw the deep ball. He can throw passes off platform. They can roll him. They can bootleg him, waggle him. They're going to have to do all that to stay away from Will Anderson and Dallas Turner and Henry To'oTo'o. So Quinn Ewers is going to have to somehow get this game to slow down against probably the fastest defense he's ever seen, and probably need to hit a couple deep balls. We know Steve Sarkisian loves the deep ball. Texas can't drive 80 yards for all their scores against that Alabama defense.
Yeah, I think for Alabama, and you talk about that defense, Chip, I still think Bijan Robinson for Texas is where it starts for Alabama defensively on Saturday. And you look at his ability both as a runner and a receiver. I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see how Sark goes about the game plan and that initial script, those first 15 or 20 plays, which I am going to go ahead and guess that number 5 is going to be a big part of that. Try to keep Alabama guessing defensively. You hit on some of it. I think you're going to have to move Quinn Ewers around some by design, but I look at scrimmage yards as a real X factor for Bijan Robinson. If Bijan Robinson's north of 100 scrimmage yards, I think that's a good sign for Texas. If he's south of that, then I'm going to probably think Alabama's in pretty good shape in this game because Ewers is capable. Xavier Worthy on the outside, certainly capable. You look at Alabama with some question marks at corner. I think Sark's going to attack that perimeter as well. But Robinson in those scrimmage yards, if Alabama can keep that to a manageable total, they should be in pretty good shape.
How big of a factor is Will Anderson in keeping Bijan Robinson's numbers down, Travis?
Oh, he's huge. And the thing about Will is that there's so much focus on him that you're obviously going to emphasize him if you're Texas and you're playing this week and your protections and trying to keep him to a manageable production number for Saturday's game. The problem is they've got some other guys that can wreck some offensive game plans as well, most notably the guy on the opposite end, Dallas Turner. So you spend too much of your personnel and too much of your plan on Will Anderson. They've got number 15 on that other side that can get the job done in his own right. And, you know, there's some things that they can do schematically. Nick's talked about it earlier in the week. For Ewers, you really want to change that picture as much as you can with an emphasis on pre-snap looks. Kind of confuse them if you can. Make Texas more one-dimensional and make Quinn Ewers beat you throwing the football.
Yeah, I look at Will Anderson, and I don't think Texas's offensive players. The film is not going to do Will Anderson justice. The guy is so relentless. It seems like, you know, he is as energized and going as quickly on, you know, the final snaps of the fourth quarter as he is at the beginning of a game, and that's just an unbelievable matchup for a freshman left tackle and Kelvin Banks, who's, you know, been a little banged up with an ankle injury. Cole Hudson, freshman at right guard for Texas, true freshman. This is going to require Texas using 2 tight end sets, 2 running backs, with Roschon Johnson as the other running back because he's a good blocker and blitz pickup guy. But this is going to require everything in Sark's playbook in terms of protections, whether it's, you know, only being able to send out 1 receiver, 2 receivers on a route. They're going to have to mix it up. They have to give Will Anderson a bunch of different looks because the guy's too good, and he studies film and seems to know where the play's going before the snap.
Yeah, Will Anderson is one of many defenders that are going to cause Texas some problems come Saturday. Guys, this matchup has been promoted and discussed across the country for days, but you two aren't looking at this from a national standpoint. You're around these teams every single day. So Travis, we'll start with you. What's something that no one's talking about but should?
I would say non-offensive touchdowns and the potential for that in this game. We saw Texas last week in its opener against ULM score twice in that regard. And it has long been a strength of Nick Saban coach teams at Alabama, whether it's special teams, whether it's defensive scores. And I think probably more so for Texas this week, going to need one of those in all likelihood to pull off this upset. Meanwhile, if you're Alabama and you get one or more of these, you got to think that you're working with a pretty manageable lead at some point in this game. So I would keep my eyes open for the potential for non-offensive touchdowns. Alabama had a punt block late in the win over Utah State last Saturday night, and we saw Texas block a punt against ULM.
Yeah, I think Travis is right on the money there. I mean, Jeff Banks, special teams coordinator for Texas, that was the coach. I think Nick Saban was really upset with Steve Sarkisian. I think he understands Sarkisian taking Kyle Flood, who came with him from the Atlanta Falcons, and AJ Milwee, who was leaving anyway. But Jeff Banks leaving, that hurt Nick Saban. Banks is one of the best special teams coordinators. He draws up, designed punt blocks like the one that Travis referenced against Louisiana Monroe last week. And, on the Texas side, I would also say that, Steve Sarkisian's been talking about playing more man coverage on the outside so that you can, bring a safety down to help against the run or bring more pressure on Bryce Young. They brought in 6'3" corner Ryan Watts from Ohio State for that purpose. And Texas is going to have to play some man on the outside, and that's going to create opportunity for Bryce Young. And so, there's a couple of storylines I think that people need to be talking more about.
I love it, guys. Let's hope the hype isn't better than the actual game. For all their great work covering these two major programs, be sure to check out Bama Online and Horns 24/7 all season long. And don't forget, Alan Bell from CBS Sportsline will join us later to pick this game against the spread. And let's just say it's a big one. But first, we're going around our nation with more from our team site experts.